two. We've got two bars. Thank you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه الطيبين الطاهرين. I bear witness that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah, and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. نسأل الله تبارك وتعالى أن يرزقنا حسن النية. We ask Allah to grant us all the sincere intentions for His sake alone. In our previous session, we spoke about some of the conditions of fasting. We spoke about a person needing to be at least mentally discriminate. We spoke about matters like this, and that the pubescent person would be the one who is obligated to fast, given certain conditions. Today, we're going to talk about the obligatory types of fasting. These are two in number, of two types. The fasting that is connected to a specific time, and the fasting that becomes necessary to fulfill. So let's start off with the first one, fasting that is connected to a particular time. So an example of this is fasting the month of Ramadan, because it's a specific time in which we fast. Or fasting that is obligatory because a person made a vow. So the reason why people make vows religiously is because that matter then becomes an obligation. And it becomes more rewardable. A person might want, they might see that I can get more reward by doing this matter, which is a good matter. So they would say, for example, نذرت لله أن أصوم الاثنين يوم الاثنين. I vow for the sake of Allah to fast on Monday. So now they're obligated to fast on Monday. It becomes an obligation. Because they use the word vow, nadartu. And so what happens is that if they fast on Monday, they would get more reward than someone who fasted on Monday but was just doing the sunnah. Okay? So this is one reason why people may vow to fast. And this is not just in fasting. There are other matters that people may put as vows. Like, for example, one of my friends, he vowed, I don't remember how much it was, but I think it was pages of the Quran. He vowed to memorize a page of the Quran every day, let's say for a couple of months. So, because it's an obligation now, it's like a way for a person to push themselves to do something. Because they don't want to fall short, because then they've got to pay an expiation. So when I asked him, I don't know how far into it he was. I asked him, so how many bags of rice have you given away? Because if you don't do it, then you've got to give something away. So he said, Alhamdulillah, I haven't given any bags of rice away yet as an expiation. So there is fasting, or there are other deeds also. Like for example, you might want to give something to somebody, and that is recommended. You're rewarded for that. But if you verbally make a vow and say, I vow for the sake of Allah to give this to gift this to that person, it becomes an obligation and you get more reward. Okay. So then there are all these rules about, okay, what if you made a vow but didn't fulfill it? What if a person made a vow and died before fulfilling it, and so on. So the fasting may be an obligation because it's at a specific time, like in Ramadan, or because a person made a vow. This fast, a person needs to intend to fast it. They need to make the intention between al-Maghrib and the religious midday. So let's say tomorrow was the 1st of Ramadan, let's say. And we've already discussed how Ramadan would enter. So if tomorrow was the 1st of Ramadan, when would I need to make an intention? I would need to make an intention after the Maghrib prayer. That's when I can start making my intention. If I intend now, just like I know now, like I'm going to fast tomorrow. Let's say we've completed 30 days of Sha'ban, and I say, okay, right now, it's whatever it is, 3:23, I'm going to fast tomorrow. And then let's say when Al-Maghrib happened, I forgot completely about fasting, and then it went up to Al-Fajr, and I still didn't realize. I woke up the next day, and then Al-Dhuhr entered. Okay? Now, if I haven't eaten anything, and I say, oh, well, remember, oh yeah, I was supposed to fast today. And I made an intention to fast, but when? I didn't make an intention between Al-Maghrib and the religious midday, which we're going to discuss. It's now Al-Dhuhr, it's after that. So that day's fast is not valid. From me, that wouldn't be valid. So when it comes to fasting the month of Ramadan, a person has to make an intention every single night, or at least a time between Al-Maghrib, so after the sun sets, until, so they could make their intention at the time of Al-Isha, at the time of Al-Fajr, or up to the religious midday. Okay? We'll discuss what that is soon. Or now actually. The religious midday is known as Ad-Dahwatul Kubra. So, the day, Islamically, is between Al-Fajr and Al-Maghrib. Okay? So, what is the middle point between Al-Fajr and Al-Maghrib? That time, that is the midpoint between the two, that is called Nisfun Nahar al-Shar'i. That is called the religious midday. Okay? So a person needs to have made an intention to fast before the religious midday. Most of us, what do? When Al-Maghrib happens, we have in our heart already that I'm going to fast the next day. And that suffices. That's absolutely fine. Okay? But let's say, hypothetically, a person didn't intend, and they had their food at Al-Maghrib, like tonight. They had their food, they did their iftar, and then after that they prayed. They went to pray Al-Isha, Al-Taraweeh, and so on. They woke up for Al-Fajr, and they had completely forgotten to make their intention. Here, the rule is, as long as they didn't eat or drink anything after Al-Fajr, as long as they didn't engage in any of the invalidators of the fasting after Al-Fajr and before the religious midday, as long as they didn't engage in any of the invalidators of fasting, they can intend now. So it's at Fajr time. Or even, let's say the sun came up and it's not yet gone beyond the religious midday. right now, as long as they didn't eat or drink, etc., they can make an intention to fast. And that fast will be valid because they, by making their intention before the religious midday, they would have fasted most of the day. Think about it. You have Al-Fajr, and then you have, after Al-Fajr, you have sunrise, Al-Dhuhr, Al-Asr, Al-Maghrib, and up to Al-Maghrib. So between Al-Fajr and Al-Maghrib, okay, in the middle you have the religious midday. If a person intends, in the middle, if a person intends to fast before the religious midday, then they fasted for most of the day. So let's say they intended to fast before the religious midday by a little bit. So let's say, for example, they fasted for, let's say, 53% of the day. Right? The other 47%, yes, they didn't have the intention to fast, but because they fasted for most of the day, which is 53, it's more than 47, right? Then their fast would be valid. However, if a person ate something after Al-Fajr and they hadn't intended to fast, or they drank something, or they're engaged in an invalidator of the fast, then their fast would not be valid. Then their fast would not be valid. So I'll give you an example. Are you ready? It's one of those maths examples. Inshallah. Here we go. So let's say Al-Fajr is at 4 a.m. Fajr is at 4 a.m. You don't sound too excited. We'll see. Fajr is at 4 a.m. By the way, I won't pick on you, just so you don't be stressed about me picking on you. I won't. So Fajr is at 4 a.m. And the following Maghrib is at 9 p.m. When is the religious midday? I'll give you 30 seconds. Al-Fajr is 4 a.m. Al-Maghrib is 9 p.m. Make sure I know as well. Right. Okay, I'm not going to ask you to answer, but I just want to see who thinks they've got an answer. I won't ask you, okay, to tell me your answer. Put your hands up if you think you've got an answer. Okay, fine. Anybody want to answer? Sorry? 12:30. Do you want to, like they say in school, do you want to show you're working?
I can show it if you want.
No, okay, you can verbalize it if you like. So how did you work it out?
So I worked out from 4 o'clock Fajr time all the way to Maghrib was 17 hours.
Okay.
And then half of 17 is 8.5 hours.
Is it though?
It's
It is. It is, yes.
16 and a half and half. It's 1 hour.
It is, it is.
And then I added that to Fajr time 4 o'clock, which will give you 12 and a half.
Fantastic. Now you see, I gave you a relatively easy example. I could have said to you, imagine I said to you, Fajr is at 4:15 and Al-Maghrib, the following Maghrib, is at, I don't know, 9:20. You would have struggled. I would have struggled. Okay? MashaAllah. But you see, so the religious midday would have been at 12:30. Alright? Which is 8.5 hours after the onset of Al-Fajr. Al-Fajr came in, 8.5 hours later it was 12:30 p.m. and then 8.5 hours later it was
half 12.
Sorry? 8.5 hours after half 12 is?
Maghrib.
Which is what time?
9.
9 p.m. Right? So as long as a person intended to fast before the religious midday and they didn't eat anything before that, they didn't eat anything after Maghrib, after Al-Fajr, then the fast would be valid. This is called Ad-Dahwatul Kubra, and this is valid within Ramadan. So you've got to remember that. So if you have fasts to make up, even if they are obviously fast of Ramadan, then you can't do this. You need to have an intention for your qada fasts. You need to have an intention between Al-Maghrib and the following Fajr. So here there's no mention of religious midday. This is only for the month of for inside the month of Ramadan itself. Okay? Right. The second type of fasting is when a person, like I just mentioned, makes up, does qada for a missed fast of Ramadan. So such a person must have an intention between al-Maghrib and al-Fajr. So a person can, they can, if they like, verbalize an intention, but they don't have to. Just to have that feeling, that's what the intention is. The feeling that, yeah, I'm going to fast tomorrow. That's enough. Now, the optional fasts, which are neither connected to a particular time, nor are they obligatory to fulfill, they are valid as long as a person fasts them before the religious midday, as long as a person intends to fast before the religious midday. So let's say you are a person who wants to fast every other day, so meaning outside Ramadan. And this is good to do. This is called the fasting of Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, and it is the best type of fasting. You fast a day, miss a day. Fast a day, miss a day. Fast a day, miss a day. So these are this is an optional fast. Here also you can bring the concept of the religious midday into play. As long as you intend before the religious midday, you will be okay. So the intention to fast a day of Ramadan must occur every single night, or as we mentioned, because every single night is an independent worship. So a person, their intention would be valid, whether it was restricted and specific or not. So whether you intended, for example, tomorrow I'm going to fast the obligatory fast of Ramadan, then that's valid. And also if a person did not restrict it and just intended, I'm going to fast tomorrow. Why? Because the time, Ramadan, it only accepts for the fasting of Ramadan. You can't say, oh, well, tomorrow's Monday, I'm going to fast the Sunnah fast on Monday. It's not acceptable. Your intention to fast, automatically, it goes towards Ramadan. So there are many things that you could say. Verbalizing the intention is generally good, but it's not a condition. So you could say, وَبِصَوْمِ غَدٍ نَوَيْتُ مِنْ شَهْرِ رَمَضَانِ, for example. Or غَدًا أَصُومُ رَمَضَانِ. Or tomorrow I'm fasting. This is how a person could verbalize it. Right. So let's go on to talk about the invalidators of the fast. So there are some concepts that we need to understand first. There are some things that invalidate the fast, and then there are further matters that are consequences in certain situations of invalidating the fast. So there are two main things or rather there are two ways in which if a person invalidates their fast, there is an expiation. Okay? An expiation meaning one of three things. If a person invalidates their fast, and I'll mention how, okay, then they have to free a slave. Meaning a person would be obligated. If they don't have a slave, the Islamic scholars say, they would buy it, the slave, and they would sell the slave. They would free the slave, sorry. If they cannot do that, which nowadays, how is a person going to do that? If they cannot do that, then they would fast because of this one fast that they invalidated. They would need to fast for 2 months consecutively. So they fast after Ramadan. They fast, and then they fast the next day, and then the next day, and the next day. Like this for 2 months. If they fast 1 month and 25 days, and then they don't fast that day, then they start again. This is because they invalidated one fast of Ramadan. If they're not able to do that, if they're not able to bear that, then they feed for one fast that they invalidated 60 poor people. This is called a kaffara. This is called an expiation. Okay? So it's either the first matter, if one is not able, then the second matter. So the first one, the slave, the second one, the fasting, the third one, feeding 60 poor people. This is what a person needs to do or look at if they invalidate a fast of Ramadan with details. So the question is, when is it an obligation to give a kafara? To look at those things. It is when somebody completely, it's one of two things. Either a person completely fulfills a sexual desire, and the operative word here is completely. Completely. If one completely, because there's an incomplete way that we're going to go through. So if one completely fulfills their sexual desire, then as well as their fast being invalidated, number one, and as well as it being an obligation to perform qada, to do that fast again after Ramadan, there is also the matter of the kaffara. That's if they completely fulfill a sexual desire. The second situation in which the kaffara comes into play is when a person completely fulfills a desire of the stomach. If a person completely fulfills the desire of the stomach by consuming something that is nutritious or medicinal, then as well as them having now committed an enormous sin, they have to perform, they've invalidated the fast, they've got to perform al-qada, they've got to repeat that fast, and then the matter of the kaffara comes into play. They've got to do one of those matters. They don't have a choice, but they see if they can do the first, then they do it. If they can't, then they move on to the second. They can't just move on to the third straight away. So these are two situations. If a person understands that really well, then they will have understood this chapter very well. So there are two main things that result in a kaffara, an expiation. The first is completely fulfilling one's sexual desires. And we're going to discuss that, what that is and what that isn't. The second situation in which there is a kaffara is eating what is nutritious or medicinal. Committing either of the aforementioned matters, these two matters, whilst fasting in Ramadan is considered to be a major transgression. This person has majorly transgressed the bounds. This is because they have contradicted the apparent act of abstaining from the invalidators of fasting, as well as completely now they've fulfilled the desire of the stomach or the private parts. And hence this results in a kaffara, in an expiation. In the Hanafi school, what we are learning, there is like I said, a kaffara for specific sexual activity, and also for eating and drinking. Also for eating and drinking. So it's very strict. Okay. So what is, and let me remind you about something. There were women that came to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and they asked him questions that were very private to them. They were specific to them. And they asked out in the open. Why? Because these were matters that they needed. Otherwise, perhaps they would have fallen into sin if they did not know. They would have been committing invalid acts of worship. So it was the habit of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions and the scholars, the tabi'un and atba' at-tabi'een, all of the Muslim scholars and the nation after nation, generation after generation, to mention these matters in an appropriate way, but to mention them in a very clear way. Shyness is praised in our religion. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna al-haya'a min al-iman." Being shy in certain situations, this is praised. And he said, "Inna al-haya'a amruhu kulluhu khair." Al-haya, meaning having this shyness, it is something that is good. But the scholars made exceptions. They said being shy or being embarrassed, and as a result of that, not asking a religious question that one needs to ask, this is dispraised. So the point here is for me to say that we're going to discuss details now that a person might not be used to them being mentioned in a religious gathering. But the scholars of the past, there was no other place where they would mention these details except in religious gatherings. The Prophet ﷺ would mention these types of details in his masjid. He ﷺ, when women came to him asking about their menstrual cycle, he would answer them, asking them about blood or moisture or other things that they had seen. He would answer them, ﷺ. And he wouldn't tell them, "Shh, not here, not in front of the people, how dare you." No, because this is something that needs to be known. So we're going to mention some of these details because sometimes people come to ask you questions, and their situation, it has some details. And these details, where else would they be covered than in an appropriate and a sensible gathering of religious knowledge? And these matters, some of them are mentioned in the Quran also. So, the first matter that invalidates the fast. The first matter, if done deliberately and without an excuse, it not only is an invalidator of the fast, it is a major sin. And it is a matter for which a person must perform the qada, meaning they must make that fast up, and they need to pay a kafara, an expiation. This first matter is sexual intercourse. Now, if it was just to be left like that, then there are many questions. What does that actually mean? What are the exceptions? You mentioned before that if a person does that, if they fulfill the desire of their private part in a complete way, then they've got to do the kafara, because the kafara is not easy. Okay? So if somebody just took it like that, then they might not be applying the religious knowledge properly. So the question is, what is the sexual activity that renders all of those matters then obligatory? Qada, kafara, repenting, and so on. This sexual activity that invalidates the fast is for a male to insert the male private part into the female private part, the front female private part. This is known as sexual intercourse. The scholars said that this invalidates the fast. Likewise, they said, now this is haram. This is an enormous sin. It's an enormous sin. If a male was to insert the male private part into the anus of a female, this is an enormous sin, and it also invalidates the fast. So in these two situations, if this was a human, if this person was alive, whilst both of them remembered that they were fasting, then they would both commit an enormous sin and the fast would be invalidated. So here, there is no difference in judgment whether the male ejaculated or not. There is no difference. the judgment is the same. Because sometimes people, they might come and ask a question and they might say, but what if the male, he didn't ejaculate? Then what? It's the same judgment. It was an enormous sin. The fast is invalidated. This person needs to make it up, and they need to look for how they pay this kafara, how they give this kafara. Many people nowadays, because they wouldn't find a slave, that's not an option that they would be able to do, to free. So they would fast for 2 months. Imagine a person invalidated their fast every, let's say, for 15 days of Ramadan. This is how they invalidated their fast. Then for every single day they would have to fast those 2 months. So you understand rules from this. From the male, if the private part was inserted into the female private part or into the anus, even if there was no ejaculation, as long as they were both alive and human, these are conditions. Alive and human and remembering that they were fasting, then the fast is invalidated and there is a kafara. As for if one of these conditions was not met, then there wouldn't be a kafara. There would be no kafara. Like if they forgot. If they forgot that they were fasting and a couple, they engaged in that intimacy, then because they forgot, the fast wouldn't be invalidated even. Never mind kafara. So that person, because they majorly transgressed this image of fasting, the fasting person, he practices the ultimate abstinence. He abstains from food, from drink and other matters. But this person has completely gone against this image of what a fasting person is. And therefore, they have to give this kafara. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Man aftara fi Ramadan فَعَلَيْهِ مَا عَلَى الْمُظَاهِرِ." He said, whoever invalidates a fast of Ramadan in Ramadan, then this person must give what the mudahir gives. In Surah Al-Mujadala, Allah revealed the details of the mudahir. The mudahir man is the one who would say to his wife, and he would be sinful for saying this, if he says to his wife that I will not have sexual relations with you just as I do not have them with, for example, my own sister or my own mother. Of course, one wouldn't engage, right? One wouldn't obviously engage in that activity with their own mother or their own sister. So if a person says that to his wife, then he's sinful because this harms one's wife. This person is called a mudahir. Allah revealed rules about this person in the Quran. That such a person, there are certain things that he would do, but he would pay a kafara. There is a situation in which he would pay a kafara. Either he would free a slave. If he cannot do that, if he's unable to do that, and only if he's unable, then he would fast 2 consecutive months. If he is unable to do that, then he would feed 60 masakin. So the Prophet ﷺ here said, "Man aftara fi Ramadan," whoever invalidates his fast in Ramadan, فَعَلَيْهِ مَا عَلَى الْمُظَاهِرِ, then he has to do what the mudahir has to do, which is he has to go through these, he has to look at his own situation. So now, everything that is less than sexual intercourse, in the way that the scholars describe the male private part inside the female private part, everything that is other than that, then there would be no kafara. Like for example, if a person, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, and this is sinful also, if a person, they masturbated, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, then in this situation, a person's fast would be invalidated. And it is sinful. And they would need to make that up, of course. But there is no kafara. Because it is not considered to be a major transgression like the one that engaged in the sexual activity, which is the actual intercourse. So here there are some questions that are asked regularly about this issue. So I'll ask the questions and I'll give the answers also. It's questions that I've been asked over the years. I tried to gather them, so inshallah we'll benefit from them. A person asked, is a man, for example, before he goes to work, he might have a habit of kissing his wife on the cheek while they're both fasting. Is this permissible? So the answer is that it is permissible while one is fasting if one does not feel that this will lead to intercourse. Or it is permissible if one does not feel that it will lead to ejaculation, to the release of the male sexual fluid. However, if one did fear that it would lead to intercourse, or it would lead to ejaculation, then that kiss, it is sinfully disliked. Makruh tahrimi. It is sinfully disliked. Sometimes people ask, what if a male had a wet dream? Meaning, they experienced nocturnal emission. While they were asleep, they ejaculated. While they were fasting. They might have woken up for sahur, and then al-fajr came and they prayed al-fajr, then they went to sleep. And then they had release of sexual fluid. What is the judgment? The answer is that they are still fasting. They are still fasting because this is not under their control. If a person forgot that he was fasting, and as a result, and we discussed this already, they engaged in sexual intercourse, then this would not invalidate the fast because they forgot. Like eating, if somebody eats something, during the first few days of Ramadan, this might happen. You might have things in your mouth, and then someone says, what are you doing? And then you have to spit them out. Like that, if a person forgot they were fasting, and they committed one of the invalidators of the fasting, they are excused. The Prophet ﷺ said about a person who ate while fasting, while forgetting. He said, ثُمَّ عَلَى صَوْمِكَ, continue fasting. فَإِنَّمَا أَطْعَمَكَ اللَّهُ وَسَقَاكَ. Indeed, it was Allah Ta'ala who fed you and gave you to drink. This was a mercy from Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. So I don't know if you've ever had that. So sometimes people, not usually in Ramadan, but in other than Ramadan, they might have, I know a person who ordered half a chicken. They forgot they were fasting. It was Monday or Thursday. They ordered half a chicken, sauce, salad, everything. And they ate it, and they burped, and they stood to pray. And I was watching them. They stood to pray. And then, as they were about to say Allahu Akbar, they said, oh, I was fasting. So that fast was really easy. At iftar, I don't even know if they ate anything. So that person, as the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wassalam, إِنَّمَا أَطْعَمَكَ اللَّهُ وَسَقَاكَ. Allah is the one that, out of special mercy, Allah gave you to eat and drink. So that fast was easy. The same goes for the sexual intercourse that would invalidate the fast. But if a person forgot, if they both forgot, then the fast would not be invalidated, just like eating and drinking. Right, so let's move on now to eating and drinking itself. So if a person eats or drinks during their fast, whilst being aware that they are fasting, this invalidates the fast. Okay? So firstly, we're talking about what invalidates the fast. We haven't mentioned the kafara yet. Okay? So if a person eats something very small, it might be a grape. It might be, what's smaller than a grape? It might be a chickpea. What's smaller than a chickpea? Something. Something smaller than a raisin. Can we get smaller than a sesame seed? Anything? No? Sorry? A grain of salt? Yeah, okay. Whether it was something actually edible or it was a pebble. It was a pebble, perhaps. Okay? Or it was a stone. If they swallowed it. Then and they did that deliberately, whilst knowing that they were fasting, remembering they were fasting, this would invalidate the fast. So what does it mean to swallow something? It's obvious, right? But Islamically, the scholars defined it. They said, if something goes past the ha is from the middle of the throat. They said if something goes past the ha point, okay, this way, goes down, then that invalidates the fast. It completely goes down past the ha, which means what? You could have water in your mouth and move it around your mouth and spit it out and your fast will be fine. You could, technically speaking, but it's better not to, if someone is cooking, let's say a woman is cooking, and she wants to taste the food to see if it's got too much salt, or she could taste it on the tongue and then spit it out and wash her tongue, because it hasn't gone down past the ha. So her fast wouldn't be invalidated, but that's not something that is recommended to do. You see how it turns out when you open the fast. That's what it's really like. Okay? So, if it goes past the ha point, then the fast would be invalidated. Now, phlegm, there are two types of phlegm. Phlegm that comes down from the head, and phlegm that comes up from the chest. So either way, if phlegm, it comes past, let's say, the exit of the kha, the letter kha, which is at the top of the throat, right? Kha, it's different to ha, isn't it? Ha is lower down, kha is above. Like sometimes if you have a sore throat, you might kha, like that, just to scratch, as it were. So if phlegm, it comes up into the mouth, past the kha, then it's considered to have come into the apparent part of the mouth. Now, if someone was to swallow it again, not that they should just spit it out. But if somebody was to send it back where it came from, then this does not invalidate the fast, because it's something that came from the body. With phlegm, this is the case. It's something that came from the body and it went back. But this is the case for phlegm. Okay, so don't generalize. This is the case for phlegm. Furthermore, now we're talking about the kafara. Okay, so if you were to eat a pebble, your fast would be invalidated. If you were to eat a 4-course meal, then right from the very beginning, your fast would be invalidated. But let's now look at the kafara. So if a person consumed via the mouth, we're going to talk about other than the mouth soon. If someone consumed via the mouth that which nourishes or medicates the body in some way, then in addition to the fast being invalidated, one is obligated to do qada for the fast and pay a kafara. So stones don't nourish. Stones come out just as they go in. So a person, if they swallow a stone, that's not going to medicate the body. It's not going to nourish the body. So if a person deliberately even, they put a stone in their mouth and swallowed it whilst remembering they were fasting, this is an enormous sin. This invalidates the fast. And that person is not allowed to eat for the rest of the day until al-Maghrib. And they have to redo that day after Ramadan. But there's no kafara. Why? Because it's not something that nourishes the body or medicates the body. Because this person is not considered, by swallowing that stone, they're not considered to have completely fulfilled, a desire of the stomach. So, again, what if a person forgot that they were fasting and they ate or drank something? Yes, then like we said, Ibn Hibban narrated that a man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said, I was fasting, but I ate and drank out of forgetfulness. So he said, alayhi salatu wassalam, atimma sawmak, continue fasting, you're still fasting. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ أَطْعَمَكَ وَسَقَاكَ. Indeed, Allah is the one that fed you and gave you to drink. And then the Prophet said, وَلَا قَضَاءَ عَلَيْكَ. And you don't even have to do qada. You don't even have to make the fast up. Your fast is valid. In another narration he said, إِذَا أَكَلَ الصَّائِمْ نَاسِيًا. If the fasting person ate something, أو شرب ناسيا, or drank something out of forgetfulness, فإنما هو رزق. This is sustenance. ساقه الله إليه, that Allah gave him. فلا قضاء عليه. There is no qada upon this person. So we said, if a person intentionally eats or drinks something, then their fast is invalidated. If they intentionally eat or drink something that nourishes or medicates the body, they also have to give a kafara. Question: what if someone did not intentionally eat or drink? So in this case, if a person didn't intentionally eat or drink, or they were forced to do so, then this person that did not intentionally eat or drink, or they were forced to do so, and they ate something that is not nourishing or medicinal, then although this invalidates the fast, one has to perform al-qada without a kafara. An example is if someone swallows something without intending to, whilst they remembered that they were fasting. Like for example, if someone is performing the madmada in wudu, the istinshaq is in the nose, the madmada is in the mouth. So if they're performing the madmada and they go back like that and they swallow something, firstly they are to blame because they shouldn't have exaggerated. We've been taught not to exaggerate when gargling, when we make wudu while we're fasting. So this person is to blame for that. So even though they didn't intentionally invalidate their fast is invalidated. The water entered the body cavity, but here they didn't completely fulfill a desire of the stomach. So yes, their fast is invalidated. They don't eat for the rest of the day now, because the day of Ramadan, it has this sanctity, where if you invalidate your fast, without a need, sometimes a person might be ill, they might need to invalidate their fast. But if a person invalidates their fast, and they didn't need to, then they are not allowed to eat for the rest of the day. So such a person, if they performed the madmada, and they swallowed something accidentally, this invalidates the fast. Because they remembered they were fasting. Likewise, if someone, for example, goes swimming while they're fasting, and they accidentally swallow something while remembering they were fasting, this invalidates the fast. Someone might say, okay, fine. If I deliberately now eat pieces of meat that are between my teeth, does this invalidate my fast? The answer is, if what you swallowed was a little, then this does not invalidate the fast. If you have food in between your teeth, like meat in between your teeth, and you're playing with it with your tongue, and then you swallowed it, this does not invalidate the fast by you swallowing that. It does not invalidate your fast if it was a little. As for if someone swallowed a lot, if there was a lot in the teeth, then this would invalidate the fast. What's the next question that this person should ask? Huh? I think I heard it. What is a little? What's a lot? Okay? First, what did you say? Oh, okay, thanks for that. Because they need to know what a little and a lot is. So, what is a little and what is a lot? The criterion by which you differentiate between a little and a lot is the amount of a chickpea. How big is a chickpea? Yeah, but I'm starting off like this and bringing it down, okay? Fine. So, if a person swallows an amount, right? So they're having between their teeth an amount. They gather it, and it accumulates to about the size of a chickpea. Then if a person was to swallow that, then this would invalidate their fast. If a person swallows an amount less than a chickpea, then this is considered to be a little. And what is equal to or more than a chickpea, then the fast is invalidated. If it's more than a chickpea, if it's a lot, then it's like, why are you not swallowing your food? It's leaving in your mouth. Okay, so someone said, okay, so if I was to insert something into my mouth, I've spoken about something that was already there, right? What if I was to insert something into my mouth that was equal to a chickpea, or smaller, let's say, smaller than the size of a chickpea? What's the judgment now? It's less than a chickpea. The judgment is this invalidates the fast. It doesn't matter how big it is, because it's coming from the outside. The exception made was the small amount of meat, let's say, between the teeth that is less when accumulated. It's less than the size of a chickpea. That's when it's already in your mouth. No, it's not like, well, there's a piece of meat here, I'll just chop it up into little pieces that are less than a chickpea, and I'll spend the next 15 minutes just having a meal in this way. No, this invalidates the fast. This invalidates the fast. Question. Someone said, I was eating sahur, and I thought that al-fajr had not yet entered. But in actual fact, as I was eating, I looked and it had gone 5 minutes over, or well over. So what's the judgment? Your fast for this day is not valid. The fast needs to be made up. And you are now obligated to refrain from food for the rest of the day. You can't eat for the rest of the day. Even though your fast was invalidated, you are not allowed to eat for the rest of the day. And this won't count as a fast. You are obligated to refrain from eating for the rest of the day. But there's no kafara, because you didn't know. It's not a major transgression where you knew and you completely fulfilled a desire of the stomach or the sexual organ and so on. No. So this is considered a lesser transgression. Fine. Someone asks, what if a person breaks their fast, they open their fast, thinking that the sun has set, but in reality it hasn't? What is the judgment? Before I answer this, in Lebanon, maybe 10 years ago, 10 or more years ago, a lot of people were relying on the radio or on the TV. So they were waiting for the adhan to come on the TV or the radio. So the adhan came on, and a lot of people, they started to eat. Then they realized, wait a second, seems like it's a bit early, right? So maybe it was like 2 or 3 minutes earlier than the actual iftar. Somebody once sent me a video of a place in Egypt where the adhan supposedly for al-Maghrib was happening, but the sun was right there. The sun wasn't even like, sometimes you see the sun halfway under and halfway up. No, it was fully up. It was there. And you could look at it, it was towards the end of the day. But the adhan was going on to say that it's Maghrib, but it obviously wasn't Maghrib. So a person needs to be careful. A person needs to be careful. Even if you need to delay opening your fast by a couple of minutes, or 3 or 4 minutes, I mean, you've fasted the whole day, you can hold out for another few minutes, inshallah. Right? Just be sure. So such a person now who ate something thinking that the sun has set, but in reality it hadn't. They had to look up and they realized, oh, I can still see the sun. The fast for this day is not valid. It's not valid. The fast needs to be made up, and the person is not allowed to eat for the rest of the day, which might be another 30 seconds. Okay? So then they're allowed to eat after that. But there's no kafara, because the person did not know that al-maghrib was in, and hence they did not intend to eat before the prescribed time. So they are not blameworthy in this sense. What if a person swallowed something that's not nourishing? Someone swallowed a Lego piece. Someone swallowed a stone. Someone swallowed, I don't know, a bead from the subha, from the tasbih. It's not nourishing. They deliberately did it. They knew they were fasting. The answer is that this invalidates the fast. There is qada, but there is no kafara. A person suffers from asthma. If they use their inhaler while fasting because they need to, otherwise if they don't, they might have an asthma attack and they need to go to the hospital and it's dangerous for them. Do they need to pay a kafara as well as make it up? So of course, if a person firstly needs to use their inhaler, then they use it, of course. If they need to use their inhaler, they don't put themselves in danger. They use it if they really need to. That's the first thing. Right, do they have to pay a kafara? The answer is no. The answer is that they don't have to pay a kafara, they just need to make it up. Now the reason why this invalidates the fast in the first place is that there are small particles that exist in the inhaler that go into the body. If a person does not intend to fast, and hence does not fast, and this person is committing a major sin by not fasting, they're not excused. Let's say a person now, he says, I'm just not going to fast tomorrow. I don't want to fast. And he's obligated to. So by not fasting, he's committed an enormous sin. Does he have to pay a kafara for each time he eats, drinks, or engages in sexual intercourse? The answer is no. There is no kafara in the first place. Why? Because he didn't start fasting. Yes, he commits a major sin for not fasting, but because the kafara is only in place when a person invalidates their fast. Yeah? So the kafara is upon the one who fasts and then invalidates it by either eating or drinking or so on. As for a person who had fasted and during the day he deliberately ate numerous times, this is another question. What if a person was fasting and they deliberately ate something nourishing? They've invalidated their fast. Now, so they're majorly sinful, they've got to do qada, they've got to make it up, they've got to pay kafara. They can't eat for the rest of the day. What if they eat again? They commit a major sin. What if they eat again? They commit another major sin. What if they eat again? They commit another major sin. But they only pay one kafara. Because the kafara is when you invalidate the fast. And this person only invalidated the fast once. What if I know that I'm fasting, but I swallow a fly? This can happen. Especially when you're on a bike. Swallow a fly. Or you passively inhale smoke or dust. In all the above cases, the fast is not invalidated. It is difficult to avoid such things. As for if someone did that on purpose, if they inhaled like that on purpose, then there are small pieces of whether dust or other things that go into the body cavity. Like for example, if somebody got a hot water bowl and they put some medicine in it, okay, some, what do they call it, menthol or something, and they put a towel over them and they inhale, that water vapor, it has a volume. So if that enters the body cavity, even through the nose, this invalidates the fast. This is different to smelling. So make sure you know the difference between, in this case, between smelling something and inhaling water vapor. There's a difference. Smelling something, our Shaykh said if you smell something, like a nice fragrance, while you're fasting, then this affects the reward of your fasting. Right? Because in that there's a relaxation. When you're fasting, you're abstaining. Okay? You are tolerating, you are, let's say, being patient with a lot of hardship going against food, not eating and drinking and so on. Smelling something nice, it relaxes you a little bit. So it kind of takes you out of that mode a little bit. Some scholars said it doesn't affect the reward. Some scholars, like our Shaykh, said it does affect the reward. There's a difference between doing that and between inhaling something like the example that I gave. So that's an important differentiation to make. Okay? Does smoking invalidate the fast? The answer is yes. That is because when a person smokes, there are small pieces that a person inhales. And this is invalidating the fast. But the person doesn't pay a kaffara. They don't have to pay a kaffara. Oh, someone said, what if I wake up junub? So a person might have had a wet dream. Okay? Or they might have engaged in intimacy with their wife and before al-fajr, and then they had sahur and they fell asleep. So they didn't pray, let's say, fajr. Then they woke up. They are junub now. They need to perform al-ghusl. They said, how do I perform ghusl? The reason why they asked this was that when you perform ghusl, there are 3 integrals. You need to wash the whole body, okay, the hair and the skin with water, and you need to perform al-madmada, which is to put water in the mouth, make sure the inner parts of the mouth are wet, and spit it out. And also, usually when the 3rd integral is al-istinshaq. You put water in your nose. Usually when you're not fasting, it's recommended to snort water up your nose. Okay, and then you blow it back out. But that recommended matter of snorting water, like with some air, like going like that up the nose, that's recommended. That's actually more than what's necessary. So when you're fasting and you need to perform al-ghusl, what are you going to do? You're going to say, oh, I'm fasting, but I can't do that. I need to pray, but I can't pray unless I do ghusl. Right? You're in the situation. No. If you get water in the concave shape of your hand like that, if you get water there, and you just put it up near your nose without sniffing it in, because that would invalidate your fast. Okay? Doing that, water would go in the different parts of the nose that it needs to touch for your ghusl to be valid, without it going beyond the part that would invalidate your fast. So there's no problem with performing the obligatory ghusl while fasting. There is no issue there. There are some other matters that I wanted to discuss really quickly, if I can list them instead of going into detail about them. Think about it like this. There are open inlets into the body. Okay? Think about a house. What is the traditional way of entering a house?
Door.
Front door or back door, if you have a 3rd door, right? Through the window is not the orthodox way in which a person comes in, or going underneath, right, through tunnels, right? Okay? Or being catapulted through the top window, or you could get imaginative, you know? MashaAllah, being bungee jumping out of a plane onto the roof. Okay, why am I mentioning this? Think of the house, think of the body as like a house, okay? What are the traditional or the proper ways of things entering the body? Usually through the mouth and the nose, right? Like this, there are details about what is considered an open inlet into the body. If something goes through an open inlet, it gets into the body cavity, through one of these open inlets, the fast is invalidated. Okay? Like if someone swallowed something, or snorted something up the nose, okay? Or they inserted an enema, which is medicine, through the anus. this would invalidate the fast. As for sitting in the bath, okay, we have pause, right? But that's not one of the considerable ways of something entering the body. So even if a person, they sat inside the bath and they could feel the coolness of the water, right? This doesn't invalidate the fast. Likewise, putting on a lotion, even if it goes through the pores, it doesn't invalidate the fast. Likewise, oil, it does not invalidate the fast. Likewise, an intravenous injections, they do not invalidate the fast. Okay? Likewise, the eye. So if a person put eye drops in, even if a person could taste them in the back of their throat after they have inserted them, this does not invalidate the fast, because this is not one of those religiously, Islamically considerable open inlets. The ear is the same also, except if a person, they deliberately put something into the ear and it reached the inside of the head. This invalidates the fast. As for if a person was showering, they're washing themselves, and water gets onto the ear and so on, this doesn't invalidate the fast, because they didn't deliberately do it. They didn't get water and put it in. Right? Like this, inshallah, there are some other issues that we will go through next week, but we are now short for time, rather time is actually finished, inshallah ta'ala, so we will continue next week. If somebody does have a question, then if you want to write it down, and you can pass it on to one of the brothers or the sisters, and they can get that to me, inshallah ta'ala, or through the, perhaps you post something in the community or something, on WhatsApp, inshallah. If you have a question, then you can ask in that way, inshallah. Allah yubarak bikum. Let's say here now, La ilaha illallah, and as-salah ala nabi. La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Next week we'll go into a few more details about this, and we'll talk about who is allowed to break their fast. And we'll talk about the fidya that a person might have to pay if they can't fast, if they're ill. If they're ill, they feel they will get better or they will not get better, or what they will write in their will, and so on. We'll discuss that next week, inshallah ta'ala, as well as some details on the kafara itself. Barakallahu bikum.